Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our number 6 episode of Roger and myself in conversation. So Roger's here with me.
I'm here.
And our topic today is Christian Hermeticism and Catholic fidelity, or fidelity to the Church. And we'll be talking about Hermeticism, this term that is poorly understood, or rather misunderstood, and how we're seeing that there is a rise, because we're seeing it through the internet, we're seeing a rise of a new Catholic subculture of Christian or Catholic Hermeticists.
Yes, indeed. Just what we need. Another Catholic subculture on the internet. I fear that Catholicism, at least in its modern expressions, is fragmenting into all kinds of internet subcultures, and I'm really seeing, we're really seeing this rise of, strange as it may sound, a Christian Hermetic Catholic subculture on the internet.
Yes, it's showing its face, and it's important as we see this, and as you, darling, have been speaking before about internet subcultures.
Yeah, internet groupthink, subcultures with their own little groupthink.
Yes,
yeah, I've been going into that episodes, yeah.
How there is a danger to get caught up in purely that little group and not actually referent to the magisterium of the Church, that the little group begins to be your authority rather than the Church. So that's why we're talking about Christian Catholic Hermeticism and fidelity to the Church.
Yeah. Yes, love. There's a lot to that, and I do want to come to that. I've already been speaking on this channel about the problem of all these little subcultures and groupthink and things like that. But I have to say that as much as I think there's truth to what you've just said, and I want to explore that further in this episode, there's a lot more going on here as well. There's a lot more going on that people are bringing in other influences outside the Church. It's not necessarily their own little subcultures here. These are complex things that we're going to try to unpack a bit here. And yes, a constant theme in what I'm saying here, and I'll be saying here today, is there are real problems here. Now, I think there's also real opportunities here. I think that this rising subculture may be offering real gifts to the Church, and I feel I have a deep respect for many of the people I see engaged in it. But it's not without problems, even catastrophic problems, which is why Valentin Tomberg, in writing about Christian Hermeticism, was it warning again and again and again, like, don't do Hermeticism outside the Church. Be loyal and faithful to the Church. It's a constant theme through everything Tomberg's saying. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be going into today. I'm going to say this as well, though, before we get going. I'm seeing this rising, subculture, Hermetic Christian subculture on Substack particularly. I'm sure it's other places as well. But before we go any further, I want to just say a little bit about our own new venture on Substack. And what I want to say is this. You and I, Kim, we have this apostolate here. Yes. And what this apostolate primarily consists of, at least what's visible to people, there's things behind the scenes as well, but what's visible to people are these YouTube videos that we've been doing all these years, and also, the website. But increasingly, we're going to be, moving things over from that very extensive website we've done over the years, the blogs we've done at the website, and pursuing the same course on Substack. And we are now looking for patrons. And I want to say something about that. Just a little note on our personal lives. As we've been pursuing this apostolate over many years, we have been living very, very modestly, and we had some very, very modest streams of income. that were supporting us in doing this. And modest is really a bit of a euphemism, to be honest, but we won't use more extreme words. Let's just say that we scraped along with these very modest streams of income, and we are now facing a situation where it looks like we might be needing to do something very different unless we can find some patrons for this work. It's like all of these things we're doing, they take so much effort, so much preparation, that without, there's a real possibility that we will have to radically scale all of this back, that we will simply not be able to continue doing the videos and doing the website work, which is now on Substack. It's and I've been really asking myself in prayer, with this set of circumstances, what do we do? Do we sort of scale it back? Do we scale it back radically? Because we have to. And the more I went into prayer, the more I felt no. This work feels to me like the most important work I'm doing. The most important work we're doing is what we've been doing with the videos, with the website, and now with Substack, also the books we've been writing. Books that are never going to make us rich, for the very select audience that they're there for. Somehow, rather than scaling it back, it seemed necessary to say the only way forward is to try asking for support. But this is new territory for us. It's really difficult because I know that there are other people who are really struggling themselves. And we want to speak about this in a way that is no pressure at all. For people who are struggling like ourselves. If you're on a very modest income, or worse than modest, and you're struggling, we're certainly we ask for your prayers, and we ask for your kind support through liking and commenting on the videos. But if you're not in that position, or maybe somebody else who could be a patron.
Yes, so any support is most appreciated, but we are specifically now looking for patrons who believe in this work and are happy to support it. So be assured, we don't want anyone to feel that they have to support this work. We would appreciate you supporting it if you so wish and want to. And the best way to support it is by a monthly donation.
Yeah, monthly at Substack. Just to be clear, yes, love. If people believe in this work and they are in a position to support it, what will really, truly support this the best is month-by-month support. We're also very grateful because there are a few of you already doing this, and this is what's going to allow us to continue, if we can continue. And just to be clear what we mean by month-by-month support, it's $8 a month at $8 US, $8 US a month. So obviously, if you're paying euros or pounds, it's a lower number there. But $8 US a month at Substack. There's also a $5 a month lower rate at Buy Me a Coffee. There's also higher rates for those who could support more at Buy Me a Coffee. And I've said this before, but we intend to make those interchangeable. So if you couldn't go for the $8 a month at Substack, but you could go for the $5 a month at Buy Me a Coffee, we would still want to give you the benefits over at Substack. But that's what we mean by patrons. We're looking for month-by-month support, and we're very, very grateful to a few of you who are already doing that. And yes, to continue, it seems that we really need to sort of build this base of month-by-month support.
Yes, thank you to all those who are supporting us already. As Roger says, we are very grateful. So now let us get back to our topic for today.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the topic, I think it's maybe good to say that we'll be building here on issues we began talking about in our last episode together, where I raised the question, is Valentin Tomberg a saint? Now, it's not strictly necessary to hear that episode first, though it might be helpful, because, what is the matter here is there's a lot of confusion about terminology here. What does Christian Hermeticism mean? We went into that before, also what did Tomberg mean? And we will be coming back to it today, but so much of the problem here is confusion, and in many ways it's an understandable confusion. But without, going back into the whole episode now, I want to just say a few things. This emerging subculture that we're seeing is throwing around a lot of terms that, just aren't that familiar to a lot of Catholics. This is obviously terms like Hermeticism itself, a term like magic in the sense of seeing God working magic and miracles in the world, saints working miracles, how the will of God works out in the world, which is utterly different from, awful things like sorcery or people dabbling in awful things for sort of occult thrills, which is the last thing Tomberg had in mind, in which he repeatedly throughout the book warns against. But there's another term I think I want to bring in here, because it's coming into this kind of discourse that we're seeing in this emergent subculture, and I hesitate to use it, but the term is that people are talking about the re-enchantment of the world, because they see that our world has become disenchanted. Now, I hesitate to say this for reasons I may get to. I'm not entirely happy with this term re-enchantment, but we may come to that later. But I think it's just helpful to unpack that that's how this subculture is speaking about this. And what they're really saying here is they're looking out at our materialistic worldview, at the materialistic world, and they're seeing it in terms that it has become thoroughly disenchanted, to use this language. It's lost all sense of mystery and magic in the world, and the people in this subculture, are even fearing that, in recent decades, since Vatican II, the Catholic Church itself has become disenchanted. And so the kind of people, I think, in this subculture, are finding, they find that the liturgy, the new liturgy has become boring. It's become pedestrian. It's become, they're looking at the roots of it. How did we get to this new boring pedestrian liturgy? And they're looking at the roots and saying, well, it had a lot to do with utilitarianism. It had a lot to do with rationalism. Like, there was a kind of rational thing saying, well, if we can make the liturgy a bit more acceptable to Protestants, but anyway, you want to say, Kim?
Yes, because I'm afraid I'm one of those people who sometimes find myself dying for the end of a Novus Ordo Mass where I can receive Holy Communion and be with the Lord, but it feels as though that's the only part of the Mass that has something uplifting, something real, because the Novus Ordo depends on the priest, and the priest celebrating will bring a certain quality to it, and as you say, it can be over-rational. And of course, when the new Mass was composed, because it was composed, there was a huge push that it makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, if something makes sense, then it's going to be fathomable. They'll be moving in the direction of becoming fathomable when the holy sacrifice of the Mass is something completely and utterly unfathomable. It doesn't make sense in that way.
It doesn't make sense in that modern utilitarian way. And just to sort of clarify what you said there, love, you were saying that it's really only the very end of the Novus Ordo, when you actually receive communion, that the magic, and the mystery of the Mass comes alive for you. You're suffering until that.
No, sorry, the consecration.
The consecration,
of course.
Yes.
He becomes present
I'm
on
sorry.
the altar. No, I didn't say it. I wasn't clear.
Yeah.
He becomes present on the altar, and then it is different.
Yeah. We may get into these issues later.
Yes.
This is just a kind of upfront thing, but I think, what I just want to highlight here is that, yes, the kind of Catholics that we're speaking about in this emergent subculture, they often tend either towards the Latin Mass, or I think in many cases in America, you now have these opportunity for sort of Byzantine Catholics that you don't really have all over the place in Europe. So they're going to the sort of Byzantine Catholic liturgy, because either in the Latin Mass or the Byzantine Catholic liturgy, they are finding this sense of mystery, and this really fits in with what they're calling an enchanted view of the world.
Yes.
But anyway, within this sort of emergent subculture that we're going to be referencing today, what's also being made is the idea that Christian Hermeticism, is a way to bring re-enchantment to the church. It's a way to break through this deadly materialism that people like Sebastian Morello, we're coming to Sebastian Morello, we were talking about him last time, are suggesting has taken a hold of the church. And I have to say that, this is one of the areas where I'm in, I don't agree with Sebastian Morello in all ways, but I am in complete sympathy here that the church is dying because of this utterly, or often, so I'm being a bit strong there, I wanted to say the church is dying because of this utterly banal liturgy. I need to qualify that. There are all kinds of good, lovely priests, who are celebrating the new Mass with dignity and reverence, and I don't want to get hugely into bashing the new Mass. The problem is that, again, I'm rehashing old episodes. We have been to so many liturgies over our lives,
yes,
because we are daily Mass goers, or that's our ideal. And I've said this before, but going through country after country, France, Spain, Switzerland, Germany, all these places you go, if you go to Mass daily, in all those countries, you do see the most terrible abuses,
yes,
the most banal liturgy. I don't want to deny that, I do absolutely believe the Latin Mass is superior in every form to the new liturgy, but I don't want to deny that sometimes the Novus Ordo is not banal, but too often it is. And I think that is also, I think this new Hermetic subculture, Catholic subculture that's arising on the net, is coming from all kinds of factors. It's coming from this hungering for what's being called, rightly or wrongly, the re-enchantment of the world. But a huge problem that I'm hoping that we went into it last time, I'm hoping we're going to go into it more this time, is that there is a language here that does create confusion for understandable reasons, and there are other problems here. If we, there are enormously, there are at least potentially enormous pitfalls here. Especially if we lose fidelity to the Holy Church, and we begin being referent to this emergent subculture or some of its literature, and forgetting about our fidelity to the Church.
Yes, and people are getting very confused with that, and confused about, or rather passing that confusion on to others about what Tomberg is talking about, and associating him with very dark things, which anyone who knows Tomberg, his works, will know that's quite a ridiculous conclusion. Because you only have to read him to see his incredible Christian and Catholic devotion, and how much he is almost pleading at times with Hermeticists to be faithful to the Church.
Yes, love, that's absolutely right. I wouldn't say he's almost pleading. He is pleading. He's pleading very strongly for fidelity to the Church. And there's at least two different issues here that we've been going into, and I want to go into more. One reason that he's pleading with fidelity to the Church is that he actually sees how messed up Hermeticism has been down through the centuries. What a lot of people aren't recognizing is that letter after letter after letter, he is basically saying people are right to be suspicious of Hermeticists. They have all kinds of problems. A principal one he's saying is that they become incredibly inflated. They become grandiose. They become full of pride. If you do Hermeticism outside the Church, outside the sacraments of the Church, including the sacrament of confession, this is a real danger, becoming really deeply non-humble. I think I'm going to be coming back to that. Tomberg's constant warnings here are the dangers here. And very complex things we're going to try to enter into here.
Yes, because the Church humbles you.
Yes, no, that's good you say that, love. And yes, if I've become any more humble over the years, because I'm certainly one of these people who I think fell into this utter kind of pride and inflation and grandiosity that Tomberg is warning of in my youth. If I am any more humble these days, it is through the grace of the church. It is through the grace of the sacraments. It's through the grace of humbling myself at confession. We're getting into big topics here because I'm frightened we're wandering off and we need to kind of stay with the theme here.
Yeah.
But no, I'll just say this. There is a second reason that Tomberg is pleading for fidelity to the church. And we've touched on this before and we're going to go into it again, I'm sure. But this is that he's really saying that so many of these Hermeticists really do not understand the miracle that is really happening on all those Catholic altars across the world, and yes, Orthodox altars across the world. You know, even if that miracle, even if the liturgy has become incredibly banal and utilitarian in so many ways, and even if the church is, you know, sometimes filled with very stupid people or even monstrous people, that incredible miracle happening on all the Catholic altars of the world is the greatest miracle, the greatest magic, the greatest mystery. And Tomberg is basically saying to Hermeticists, he's saying, you would be nothing without this miracle that the Catholic Church, for all its faults and failings, is bringing through to the world. You know, every day, I've said this in earlier episodes, you know, there are something like 400,000 priests in the world. We have you know, at least 200,000 of them, I'm sure, are celebrating the Mass every day. The Mass is this utter miracle. I think the Mass is holding the world together, but we're going to be coming back to these things. My real point now is that, yes, to underscore what you're saying, Tomberg is indeed pleading with Hermeticists to sort of see their faults and failings and how messed up they are and how messed up they've been down through the centuries. And he's saying the answer lies in fidelity to the Holy Church. So we're going to be going about that, but just to sort of bring us back more to the present, we are saying this, you know, for reasons that I brought into in the last, you know, episode, that there is a lot of confusion going on, you know, including things that are being kind of distressing for us, but, you know, a lot of confusing things that we're hoping to try to address. A little bit anyway.
Yes, and the situation that we spoke about in the last episode, of certain accusations towards people that we cherish, like Sebastian Morello, Peter Kwasniewski, Charles Coulombe, but they even were coming towards you, and then of course that affects me too. So we have been caught up in this whole internet confusion problem, misinformation. But we went into that in the last episode, and I don't think we need to go into it all again now, although there are a lot of issues, including personal issues.
Yes, there are different issues here, love. There's a set of personal issues that will be here today, gone tomorrow. I don't really want to spend too much time on that, but I think it points to a bigger picture that is far from here today, gone tomorrow. I actually think that these personal things point to something that is going to be emerging more and more and more over years to come in Catholic culture. These things, I better recap what they are. I think they're not going to go away. And I want to say some things about we both do, about the longer term consequences of this. And we want to speak about being really, truly faithful to the Church. Fidelity to the Holy Church in this whole mix.
Yes, and our love for her.
Yes, our love for the Church and the importance of love for the Church in the set of circumstances that we're about to start. But let me just give a small recap of the personal situation as it stands at the beginning, mid-2025. How what's going on right now has been triggered is that last year Sebastian Morello published a book called Mysticism, Magic and Monasteries. The book was published by Peter Kwasniewski. It had a foreword by Charles Coulombe, and the book had a lot to do with Valentin Tomberg, who I speak about a lot on this channel, obviously. And so, I'm involved in this as well. And what I gather has been happening, and I'm beginning to sort of wade into it, is that there have been all kinds of attacks on, people, as you say, that we cherish, like Charles Coulombe or Sebastian. And I've not been able to go into it all, but I'm now beginning to wade through all these things going on the internet. It's very, very clear to me that there is very, very significant misunderstanding of what Sebastian was trying to do with this book. Let me say just something very brief about the book. The book is, well, I said it before, I think. It's a roller coaster of a book. It's kind of zipping there, zipping here, zipping everywhere. Um, you know, and I do fear at times that it's, losing people. Or it's a book that you need to read very slowly and carefully to get this out. But it's a book that I very deeply believe carries enormously important things for the church in the 21st century. What Sebastian is concerned about is that even Catholicism has become more and more and more materialistic and rationalist. Catholicism is kind of joining the trajectory of the last centuries through Protestantism, through the so-called Enlightenment, and people are people can be Catholic but not really have a supernatural sense of the world anymore. And the book is really speaking about Christian Hermeticism, and we've got to come to that term, as some kind of role, having some kind of role to play in this, in terms of finding ways that we can be with the ways that the medieval mind was able to understand and appreciate the supernatural. What is very core to this book is that we can no longer see the world the way the medieval mind could. The medieval mind had no doubt of our Lord Jesus Christ's real presence in the Holy Eucharist. It celebrated it in all kinds of ways. But we're losing that capacity to see the supernatural that was so obvious to medieval man. And Sebastian is invoking Valentin Tomberg's work and the work of Christian Hermeticism as a way of getting back to that, cognition of the supernatural.
Like
and,
a remedy.
Yeah, yes. And I think the book has enormous benefits. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything in the book. I've said that. And it now seems that in all kinds of strange ways, some of it is the real misunderstandings around the term Hermeticism or Christian Hermeticism, and we need to speak about that. All kinds of very, very awful kinds of things are being thrown around. I haven't seen this myself, but, people somehow seem to think that Sebastian is speaking about dark occult practices. I heard that there is some kind of, I haven't seen it, horrible meme of Sebastian generated by AI as something like a black magician, something like that, or maybe even more horrible. I really don't know what's going on. And so I can see how all of this is very distressing for the people concerned, to be so deeply misunderstood. And I'm going to have to say a little bit more about Christian Hermeticism, although we went into it a lot in the last episode and in the previous episode I did about Sebastian. But I'm really concerned about a wider set of issues because, maybe, I don't know because I'm not wading through all of this, but maybe there are people, trying to chase down people that they suppose are dark occultists, and they hope to somehow eliminate them from this discourse. And what I really suspect is that what we're calling here Christian Hermeticism is rising. It's going to go rising year after year after year, decade after decade after decade. And I say that for all kinds of reasons that I want to bring in. I just don't think this is going to go away. So I want to speak about that. And as I've made it clear in other episodes, what I think is so key in all of this is fidelity to the church. Fidelity to the church. The way Valentin Tomberg, in his work on Christian Hermeticism, encourages again and again and again.
Yes, we've said in the last episode that Tomberg was encouraging people to practice Hermeticism within the church.
Yeah.
And trying to outline the dangers of not doing that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello everybody, and we're back after a few days. Now we use these church bells, as Roger has mentioned in other episodes, we use these church bells in certain episodes to separate segments recorded at different times. So a few seconds for you, dear listeners, might be a few days for us, as is the case now. And we've been, or rather you, darling, have been speaking about the loss of faith, and you mean not just the loss of faith in the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist, but the loss of the faith in the fact that we live in a world of mystery and miracles, that all the time we're surrounded by God's loving presence, we're surrounded by angels and saints, and our dear and departed ones, many of them, are not gone, but they're here, they're around. We visit them at their graves and pray for their souls. Anyone who's been in a cemetery and really prayed, you have the sense of the presence of the faithful departed. And they still love us as we love them. So you're speaking about the fact that we live in this world full of mystery and miracles, that things don't just happen by accident, for instance. Divine providence is real, it guides us through life. And then we have the sacramentals, the holy images that bring God, bring the saints, bring the Sacred Heart, bring the Blessed Virgin to us through those blessed images and statues. And we have relics and holy water. The world of faith is filled with mystery and miracles.
Yes, absolutely. Mystery and miracles, as you say. And there will be authors, like Valentin Tomberg, who use this term sacred magic. And obviously, at least it should be obvious, that a term like sacred magic, that certain authors have used, Catholic authors, people like Tomberg, do not mean sorcery by that. They mean God's magic. That's certainly how Tomberg spoke. If you read the book carefully, if you see the book carefully, he does speak about sacred magic being present in the world, wherever real love exists, wherever adoration of God exists, wherever, I said this in the last episode with you, love, where sincerity exists. This beautiful line from Tomberg about the angels fall down in adoration whenever the human voice is truly sincere. Because we're so messed up, it's very hard to be truly sincere. All these things for Tomberg, he uses a language, it's maybe an unusual language, but he calls them sacred magic. And at the same time, he speaks about sacred magic, the highest sacred magic, he says, the greatest form of sacred magic, for Tomberg, is the holy sacraments of the church. Anyway, you can see how, terminology like magic can be confusing, because there's obviously also horrible, unsacred magic in this world. This world has horrific things out there, real things out there, like, seances. There is a world of black magic. There is a world of people trying to evoke the dead, evoke demons. And of course, in this, world of mystery and miracles, the supernatural includes the demonic. It includes fallen angels that are trying to possess us, are trying to tempt us, are trying to control us. and it includes the holy angels all around us, in combat with the fallen angels. But anyway, obviously, anyone who's really reading Sebastian Morello's book, truly reading it, it should be clear that Sebastian Morello has nothing to do, with these kinds of awful things that, I've just sort of had to evoke there. Again, what Sebastian is doing, he's looking at the medieval mind, and he's saying, why did the medieval mind see and understand these things, and how did we lose it, and how did we get back to it? And so, he's clearly taking in things, and some of these things might be a bit over some people's heads, to do with the so-called Enlightenment, of the 17th century. And I've tried speaking about this on these episodes. In these episodes I've spoken about, rationalist and materialist philosophers, that go back to people like Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, David Hume, well, they go back to Descartes, really. I've spoken about that in previous episodes here. But, what Sebastian's also getting at in this book, is that this rationalist, materialist thinking that used to be the, subject area of people like David Hume and Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, has actually begun to infect Christianity, to infect the church.
Yes, there's something that I could actually interject here.
Yeah.
When we were at university, there was one lecture by the head of the theology, who was an Anglican minister, and you weren't present at that lecture. I think you were ill.
Yeah, I know what he was like, though. I know how these people thought, even in a so-called Christian college. But go on, love, yeah.
Yeah, and he gave a lecture, and he said, and I can almost quote him verbatim, he said, in the past, human beings believed in angels and demons. In the past.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't exactly say we don't today, but his words were something like, we know better now.
Yeah.
And he was invoking Rudolf Bultmann.
Yeah.
And his whole...
great liberal Protestant theologian, at least for this mindset, a great liberal Protestant theologian, but one of the most important liberal Protestant theologians of the last century.
And his whole trajectory of demythologization of Scripture.
Yeah.
In other words, and he was trying to introduce this into our course.
Yeah.
Well, he was introducing it.
Into his course.
No longer do we believe in angels and demons.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of Anglicanism, certainly didn't take the resurrection seriously, didn't take the virgin.
No, well, he said that.
Yeah.
He said, and now we even question the resurrection.
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
A Christian saying, we question the resurrection.
Yeah. So, we're going down a bit of a detour, but this is the kind of thing Sebastian is trying to combat. And yes, you've been speaking about our Anglican education, Kim, our liberal Anglican education, but all this thinking has begun very much to creep into liberal Catholicism. It's not quite as radically as bad as Rudolf Bultmann and this lecturer, but all these things, are now, part of Catholicism as well, or a part of Catholic culture. Huge topic, we can't go into it all now, but my real point here, and thank you for bringing all that back to me. My real point here is that not only is this what Sebastian is concerned with, it's what Tomberg was really concerned with too. And he saw that down through the centuries there had been Hermeticists who had been very aware of this fall into materialistic thinking. We've spoken about Rudolf Steiner in previous episodes, and no matter how problematic Rudolf Steiner is for the church, he understood this very, very well, that the world was getting lost in this kind of materialism and this kind of rationalism.
Yes, whilst Rudolf Steiner is problematic for the church, you can see he had far more reverence for Christ crucified and Christ resurrected than did Rudolf Bultmann.
Yeah, absolutely. This is part of all the paradox here. Steiner is absolutely problematic, and yet his reverence for what happened on Calvary that changes the cosmos is immense. But anyway, coming to Tomberg, coming to Christian Hermeticism, as Tomberg speaks about it, Tomberg would have been really aware that for centuries there had been various Hermetic thinkers. He would have Christian Hermetic thinkers. He would have included Steiner in this. Some of them, regrettably, were not always orthodox. Some of them, like Steiner, lamentably, really criticized the church. We've spoken about this in other episodes, that Steiner really felt that the church is tragic. It's tragic. He felt this was something that was no longer appropriate for modern man, even though Steiner had this tremendous reverence for Christ crucified and resurrected. But some of the Christian Hermeticists that Tomberg was addressing were completely orthodox people, completely orthodox within the church. Part of the whole problem here, love, you know this, but we better say it, is that people take a word like Hermeticism and they assume it has some single univocal meaning. And to try to illustrate how misguided an idea like that could be, I'm going to take another word. It's a word that can evoke some very problematic things for some people. That word is nationalism. And I'm going to suggest this. If you know a bit about nationalism, you know that there are all kinds of different forms of nationalism. There's a cultural nationalism. Here in Ireland we have my friend Morello who's a very dedicated Irish cultural nationalist, wants to revive the Irish language. You have many people like that. You have civic nationalism. You have political nationalism. Here in Ireland, of course, we have paramilitary nationalism, the IRA, sort of blowing up people, bloodshed, killing people for the cause of a, United Ireland. That's another form of nationalism, the IRA.
And the opposite.
Well, yeah, of course.
The Unionists.
Yeah, of course. And then, you go to something like the ethno-nationalism of Hitler. Hitler who's an anti-Semite, and who considers for the preservation of his people, he's got to wipe out an entire other race that he condemns as subhuman, a subhuman species. So, the single term nationalism includes really, really horrible stuff like that. And it includes noble things like, I think, my friend Morello O'Kellick espouses. So there's a little plug for you there, Mal. But my real point is that a single word can mean many different things, and there have been all kinds of Hermeticists down through the centuries, including Jewish and pagan Hermeticists. We're going to be unpacking this more. But what I really want to say is that there's a certain language to Hermeticism, just like there's a language to nationalism. Not everyone knows that language. And I was someone who was, really steeped for years and years of my life in the language of esotericism, or the language of Hermeticism, and many New Agey things as well. A language that's, often very confusing for people who are outside this stream of thought.
Yes, of course, you were in this esoteric stream of thought, and as you've said so many times, it took someone like Tomberg using that kind of language, esoteric, hermetic language, to rescue you from the New Age and bridge you, if you like, towards the church and then into the church, and ever more traditionally so.
Yes, absolutely. That's the key here. Tomberg is writing these Catholic works for esotericists and hermeticists, like the kind of person I was. And, the kind of person I was looked down on Christianity. He was actually very aware of, a Christianity that seemed to him, current word we're all using now in this debate is disenchanted, or demythologized Christianity, to come back to Bultmann. The kind of person I was would have looked down on Christian theology. He never went near Christian theology or Catholic theology. It took someone like Tomberg writing in that language to help wake me up to the mystery of Christ and his church. Yeah. And Tomberg is doing the same for there's no statistics out there, but thousands and thousands of people are coming to see the mystery and the magic of the Catholic Church, thanks to Tomberg speaking in this language. Tomberg is rescuing people just like he rescued me. But to try to keep on track here, Sebastian Morello's book is really in, the same vein as Tomberg, as I've been speaking about in these episodes, on Sebastian Morello's book. In some ways, it's a continuation of Tomberg's work. Now it has, I've said it, I think the book has enormous benefits. It can really help the church at this time in this combat with, a liberal Catholicism that is all about demythologization, tragically. Some of the theologians like Schillebeeckx at Vatican II, they were all about demythologization. They had sort of drunk very deeply of Bultmann, but we won't get me going on that again. I think it has real benefits there. Does it mean that it's a perfect book? Does it mean I agree with it in all ways? No, I don't. The book has faults, just like Tomberg's book has faults. But whatever faults and failings Morello's work has or Tomberg's work has, it's clear to me that it's being severely, severely misunderstood. Misunderstood to the point of absolute absurdity. And, if I want to try to be charitable to the people that are misunderstanding it, part of me wants to say it's not necessarily their fault. We, in the 21st century, are living in this horrifically dumbed-down culture where people don't even know how to read books anymore, where attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, let alone do they know how to read a book as deep and as erudite as, Sebastian Morello's book or Tomberg's book. Terrible things are happening to our culture. And I suspect that a lot of the people here are sort of very young people, who, through no fault of their own, may not even know how to read deeper books like this anymore. Huge, huge topics. But what I fear is trying to happen, and we're going to be going more into this, is that something here is happening in microcosm that points to a bigger picture. In microcosm, there's been this flare-up around Sebastian Morello's book, and I think there are probably people thinking that, they can hunt Sebastian down and maybe they can kind of silence him, or goodness knows what they're really thinking. And maybe they're thinking that everything that Sebastian represents is just going to sort of, his errors are going to be exposed, things they don't even understand, and maybe the whole problem that they see, they think is just going to go away. Well, I don't think it's going to go away.
No, it's not.
I think it's something that's actually growing, and I want to say this. We're going to be talking about why this is growing, why I think it's growing. We're going to be talking here about what I think is a very mixed phenomenon. I think it's going to bring real problems for the church, because I think some of these Hermetic Christians, and we're going to start speaking about them, aren't faithful to the church. Tomberg was calling for a Christian Hermeticism that was absolutely faithful to the church. He was calling for a spirit of love for the church. We went into this in the last episode, honoring the church, recognizing that we are nothing without the church. And his whole call is for Hermeticists who will love, honor, and obey the church. But in some of the kinds of Hermetic Christian circles that are now arising on the internet, I'm not seeing that fidelity. I'm not seeing that love. And many of them are like the person I used to be. They really, really don't understand the utter sacred magic of the Eucharist, the utter sacred magic of the sacraments. They don't understand the sacred magic of going to confession and having your soul cleansed. They don't see these things that Tomberg is pointing to. Huge, huge topic. My real point now is that none of this is going away. None of this is going away. I think we are
needed.
Yes, this is the thing. It also, as much as it will and is creating problems, it's also creating real opportunities for conversion, and opportunities to really begin questioning a kind of demythologized Catholicism that has been, for the past 60 years at least, more and more resembling the kind of demythologized Protestantism, that you and I had at that Anglican college.
Yes.
All right, love. We're back again, somewhat later. We've both been reviewing what we did, and as you know, I can be terribly unhappy, almost to the point of wanting to throw it away. But I think some very, very good things have been said. I think you've said some very good things, so we're not throwing it away. But I just need to make some corrections at this point. One of the things that I'm unhappy with is the kind of way that I simply criticize people, sort of saying it's due to people, I've been suggesting, or I worry that I sound like I've been suggesting, that all the confusion that is being generated here, comes down to a younger generation not being sufficiently educated enough, or, I spoke about groupthink and echo chambers, and these are real problems, and I want to come back to them, that
Yes.
people do just listen to their echo chamber rather than the magisterium. But really what's going on here is far more complex than this.
Yes, it is.
And yes, thank you. And I want to say again, and we went into this in the last episode, that there are problems here. There are doctrinal problems. I think, and I've been saying this in these episodes, that nearly all of this is to do with strange and unfamiliar terminology.
Yeah.
But there are reasons, legitimate reasons, why people would be confused. Now, the purpose of this episode is not to go into all of that. We've been into it a bit before. The purpose of this episode is really to sort of speak about this emergent, Christian Hermetic subculture that we're seeing on places like Substack. But what I'd like to bring in right now is that there is work to be done in terms of clarifying these doctrinal issues, and I want to pay a special tribute because in this whole story there's a man, I'd never heard of him before, called Ross Arlen Teakin. I'm going to give a link to his articles on Substack down below,
Which are very good. Those articles are very good, and they've really helped the entire situation.
Yes, they're brilliant articles. My mind I was already starting to think some of the things that Ross Arlen Teakin was saying, but he certainly went further than I could and did a better job than I could. And as I say, this episode's not about this. And really, I don't even know, because just in these conversations, if I were to try to do something like Ross Arlen Teakin, it would have to be one of my big episodes where I plan it out, work it out. This is just more an impromptu discussion between us, love. But I want to be fair to people. So I want to point people to Ross Arlen Teakin and the valuable work he is doing in clarifying these doctrinal issues that do exist. Very complex picture here, but we'll keep talking around it. Maybe just very essentially, I will repeat again that what is at the heart of Sebastian Morello's book, and it's the heart of Tomberg in so many ways as well, is that there is a call, and that call, the Hermetic call, is primarily a call of new ways of seeing the world, new ways of meditating on the world, contemplating the world, trying to bring us back to what the medieval mind could so clearly see, the medieval mind that could see, the presence of Christ, in the Mass, the medieval mind that was, what is being called enchanted. I'm not quite sure I like that term, but that is at the heart of what Sebastian Morello's book is about.
The mind that saw angels and demons clearly.
Yes, exactly. And I just want to stress thank you. That's at the heart of this. And yet there are all kinds of other issues to do with just exactly what Christian Hermeticism is. And I'd like to just say a little bit here. I'd like to invoke the early Christian father of the church, Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr is famous for saying something about Socrates, who of course was the inspiration for Plato. He spoke about Socrates as being a Christian before Christ. And I'm saying that to invoke the fact that, from the beginning of the church, Christians looked back to, yes, these pagan philosophers. They looked back at Socrates, they looked back at Plato, they looked back at Aristotle, and they saw that they had something to offer. And it wasn't a matter of throwing this out because it was pagan. It was a matter of, we've spoken about this before, baptizing this, bringing this into the church. And what it's a matter of here is that there's a legendary or half-legendary figure, who really knows, who goes by the name of Hermes Trismegistus, pre-Christian sage, honored as a pre-Christian sage, and a set of writings, it's called the Corpus Hermeticum, somewhere around the 15th century in Italy, re-emerged. So, for 1500 years, people had been reading Plato, they'd been reading Aristotle, they knew about Socrates, but they didn't know much about Hermes Trismegistus. And this Corpus Hermeticum really took Renaissance Italy by storm. Catholic priests, Catholic scholars began to engage with the Hermetic thinking in the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, there are all kinds of problems here in this. I don't want to deny this. But, what Tomberg is saying, I should just say this. It didn't just end with, Renaissance Italy. It began to set up a current of people, down through the centuries, who were thinking in these Hermetic ways, thinking about ways again of how to see this world of God's creation as a reflection of the world above, as above, so below. We've spoken about this before.
Yes.
But the real question here that Tomberg was about is, can we baptize, for all its problems, Hermetic thinking? And that's really what it's an issue of here.
Yes, this could all sound quite strange and unusual for certain Catholics, and we could say it's quite easy to understand why these ideas can be misinterpreted or thought of as being dangerous. And there's so much more to say. It's not easy to put this in just a few sound bites. But there's something I want to add here, and it is about tradition, that living the tradition of the church, everything grows out of what was. And we see how elements of the ancient Greek world, the ancient Roman world, how the New Testament grew out of the Old Testament, Christianity grew out of the Judaic tradition, but adding all these different things from the Hellenistic world, as I said, the ancient Roman world. Tradition moves slowly and grows from what has been, and that is how it moves within the church herself as well. So I just want to add that. But as we said at the very beginning, we have come to see a much bigger problem coming out of these misunderstandings, incomprehensions, accusations, something you are seeing. And do you want to speak a bit more about that, or rather start?
Yes, I absolutely do, because really I'm interested in a meta perspective here, like what is really going on here in a world where people can think they understand a book that don't understand it, suddenly generate artificial intelligence pictures like this based on things that they haven't digested at all. There's a whole vast bigger picture here of what the internet in general is doing to Catholic culture. And somehow I've been led into this. And how do I say this? Look, this is going to come at this from a very odd perspective, but I'm aware of Catholic culture via the internet fragmenting into all kinds of different subcultures. So, there's obviously a traditionalist kind of subculture with traditionalist people on, speaking about Catholicism. There's a kind of charismatic subculture. Somebody recently introduced the term to me. I hadn't heard it before. He said that people were speaking about charismatics. So this would be a subculture of people who were into charismatic Catholicism and were into traditional Catholicism. Then, I mean, and it just gets more and more and more.
Yes, and within those groups themselves, there are lots of splinters.
Yes, exactly. And I've been led to a reflection here because part of the bigger picture here, the meta perspective here, that I'm concerned about is that we're now in a situation where for 2,000 years the Catholic faith has been passed on primarily through the bishops and the priests. Bishops and priests who had, years and years of training and education, and now it's being passed on by internet people. Certain internet stars, and they are creating, in some cases, subcultures around them. And so when I made this statement that this isn't going to go away, this kind of Hermetic Catholic subculture, I actually think something like this is now emerging. This is my impression. Something like this is now emerging.
And yes, darling, you and I have some kind of role in this.
Yes, it seems we do. I want to very quickly say, this was never my intent. I actually never really wanted to do these Tomberg videos on the channel. My interest was elsewhere. My interest was with Ireland, or Iler Belloc, or, the whole problem of the liturgy in the church, other themes. But clearly, we're playing a role here now. We are doing these Tomberg videos. And one of the very, very key things that I feel that we need to bring across here, that I feel is so unfortunately not being heard, is how much Valentin Tomberg had no use for a Hermeticism that wasn't, within the church and wasn't faithful to the church. He was all about fidelity to the church, and we may come back to that, and love for the church, because he saw what the church was really, really giving. Some people get all caught up in the human side of the church, and they don't realize that the Eucharist, the church is pouring out the Eucharist. Yeah, go on, Kim.
Yeah. We're in this special week with the focus on the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and on the cross, when his heart was pierced with the lance, Holy Church came into being. The sacraments poured out, the blood and the water, the baptism, the blood, the Eucharist. And it is understood that moment as being the moment the church was born. And of course, with the devotion to the Sacred Heart, we take that symbol of his heart pierced with the lance and his blood pouring. And we've just come through Pentecost, where the church was given to the world, and the church is Christ's bride. She came out of his heart, and she is his bride. This is what the church is. Yeah. And then Jesus names Peter, the rock,
yes,
or Simon,
yeah,
Jonas,
yeah,
names him Peter, the rock on which his church is going to be built,
yeah,
is built.
Yeah.
And when I think sometimes about Pentecost and that moment that the church is given to the world, where the disciples, with the apostles and the disciples, with Our Lady, are gathered in the upper room. And if we look to the writings of Venerable Katharina Emmerich, she writes of how at the Last Supper, in her visions, she saw Jesus ordaining the apostles, priests and bishops.
Yeah.
Now if we take that and we look to the upper room where they are gathered, preparing for the descent of the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, there gathered are Our Lady, bishops and priests, and the disciples, the laity.
Yeah.
This is the church,
yes,
that Christ has given us.
yes,
This is the pattern he has given us.
yes,
And it does not mean it's easy.
Yes.
To follow a hierarchy who appear to be going astray.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to be obedient.
Yeah.
But this is the pattern he gave us.
Yeah.
And these members of the hierarchy are fallen, just as you, Roger, and I are fallen, and each of us are fallen.
Yeah.
And they will make mistakes, and yes, we have seen huge mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's the pattern
Yeah.
that Christ gave his church, his bride.
Yeah.
And you and I have come to really deeply love the church.
Yes.
And we feel this fidelity to her
Yes.
through that love.
Yes.
And as I say, it does not mean it's easy.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
To see the things that go on.
Yeah.
So hello again, and we're back. And as you will have just heard, it's been a little while since that last bit was recorded, and that seems to be how this episode is going. And now we're here in the heat of a rare time in the summer here in the north of Ireland. It's been very cold up till now, this last couple of days, and we're now in the heat, and you may hear some farm noises behind us at times because we're in a farming area, farming country, and the farmers are making good use of the weather for their fields. And before we move over to you, darling, I just want to make a little correction here, that in that last section that we made a short while ago at Corpus Christi, in the octave of Corpus Christi, I said writings of Venerable Anna Catharina Emmerich, and of course she did not write her visions down, they were taken down. So I just wanted to make that little correction.
Yes, Kim, I find that I want to make all kinds of corrections. This episode may just seem like a simple hour to most listeners, but it's been a bit like pulling teeth. And I think part of the reason for that is that I'm facing the need to describe things that are not familiar to people, including what I'm speaking about this new emergent, Hermetic Catholic subculture. Like, I'm aware people are going to think, what the heck is Roger speaking about? And to be honest, I'm not always clear myself. It's something that's emerging for me, and I'm struggling to find a way. I'm not sure all the things I've said I'm completely happy with. Parts of me even wanted to throw this episode out, but we're going to try to pull the threads together now. Hopefully get this finished at last. Look, I think where we've been, where I was going to with this, is that we do face, so when we ask, maybe we put it this way, if there is this emergent kind of Hermetic Catholic subculture going on, and I want to speak more about it, and I think there is, what are the reasons for it? Where is it coming from? And we've been all along alluding to that. No, I want to say one last thing before I go on. I wanted to say this. This episode was born several weeks ago when I went to Mass, and it was immediately followed by Eucharistic adoration, and somehow in the double combination of the Mass followed by Eucharistic adoration, it really somehow seemed to come to me in the silence. And by the way, back then I would have been struggling with all this stuff going on with Sebastian Morello and all these things going on, that there was a need to do an episode like this, and also a need to stress fidelity to the Holy Church, and why everything we're doing on this channel always seeks to be faithful to the Holy Church. Yes. This really came, out of deep silence and Eucharistic adoration, following a Mass, and somehow I've been having to grapple with these things. But anyway,
You mean the inspiration for this episode?
The inspiration for this episode, and a feeling in the silence that I needed to try it, even if I didn't even feel ready for it. You know, I feel like I've bitten off a little bit more than I was ready to chew. But anyway, if we're seeing this culture, this emergent subculture, and I think we are,
yes,
there are reasons for that. And I want to go through some of them that we've already been alluding to. So in general, I've already been speaking about a general kind of fragmentation of Catholic culture that is happening in the 21st century anyway. We've had a situation for 2,000 years where the faith was handed on by the priests and bishops, but now many people are distrusting their priests and bishops, and many priests and bishops are saying, at times, terribly materialistic things. But, you know, the fragmentation of Catholic culture on the internet is bigger than that anyway. You know, I started speaking, I think, before about tradismatics and charismatics and traditionalists. You know, never heard of tradismatics before. But, you know, there are smaller sort of subcultures that emerge on the internet. So there will be a whole subculture, you know, about Medjugorje. And without getting into that, you know, or, you know, I even know what you could describe possibly as a very small subculture around the apparitions of Our Lady that were said to happen at Garabandal. I might just throw out very briefly, because we're talking about Tomberg in this episode, that these, you know, Our Lady was said to appear in Garabandal during the 1960s. Valentin Tomberg, in his private correspondence, testified that he believed that something very real was happening there. He spoke about the children as being sane and healthy. Seeing Our Lady, he felt, but he was also concerned that certain kinds of sensationalism around the whole event could lead to trouble. But we can't go into that. That's just a little aside for those of you into Tomberg, and I assume that's actually a primary audience of this episode anyway. My real point is that there are these subcultures, or no, maybe I'll just mention another one. I will not mention names, but there is a certain YouTube person whose name I'm not going to mention, who has what seems to me, from the little I know of him, his own brand of anti-Semitic kind of Catholicism going on. And around his spirit, I'm not going to say more, I think there's a small subculture gathered there. So, you know, there's this, Catholicism is kind of, through the internet, fragmenting into these subcultures anyway. And of course, you know, there's a whole thing that Catholicism has always had different expressions, you know.
Yes, of course, like the Franciscans, well, the Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the
Jesuits.
Augustinians, Salesians. There are different aspects, or what can you say, different charisms, all the different orders of monks and nuns. But this is quite different now, because they were all faithful to the magisterium of the church. They were all faithful to Rome. And what's happening now with this kind of internet fragmentation is that people can get lost, as we've said. I said this earlier. People can get lost in that fragmented little arena, if you like, through the internet, with people thinking similar things, and that becomes their magisterium, that becomes their authority rather than the church. And this is a huge thing that Tomberg was seeing, that there was this danger with Hermeticism, Christian esotericism, that there would be groups forming outside the church with their own magisterium, and that he, as we said before, was pleading that Hermeticism comes into the church, that and participates within the church.
Yes, Kim, Tomberg, of course, as we've been saying all along, was most certainly pointing to that. And I think what I'd say is that, of course, Tomberg's writing back in the 60s, long before this utter fragmentation of the 21st century, everyone in their own little echo chambers, you know, we're all becoming radically separate in certain ways, I think. So this is going on, you know, in terms of this emergent Hermetic Catholic culture, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to say again, it isn't necessarily limited to this. You can have, you know, this anti-Semite informing your Catholicism. Or maybe some people have a kind of very, Donald Trumpian American kind of Republican Party Catholicism, where certain things are, above the magisterium, or certain other groups are with, certain apparitions that are not, approved by the church, or at least not yet approved by the church. There are very difficult things here, and I'm not trying to sort of, negate these things. As I say, Tomberg, in his own private opinion, affirmed Garabandal. So I'm just trying to say that, with the new culture of the 21st century, the internet, this splintering is like probably nothing that Tomberg ever imagined when he was warning again and again and again about the need for Hermeticists to be faithful to the church. Look, I want to just bring in Rudolf Steiner here briefly, but Rudolf Steiner is not the only source here that, of sources coming from outside the church. As I'm beginning to look around this, what I think is an emergent subculture of Hermetic Catholics that, again, I don't think is going to go away. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them are very referent to Rudolf Steiner. And, they see, like I see, they see Rudolf Steiner's incredible veneration of Christ, which maybe they don't feel, with the bishops or the priests. Huge topics here. But my point is that they can start bringing anthroposophy in. And I'm labored this before, but I want to labor it again. Tomberg had these anthroposophical works that he wrote in his youth. He wanted them not republished. They contain things that he later came to consider dangerous. We're not unpacking all of that again. But this is also, one of the many threads throughout Meditations on the Tarot. Tomberg is saying, Hermeticism, while it carries gifts and opportunities, it's very, very flawed. It leads to grandiose individuals who, outside the discipline of the church, become very inflated, lacking humility, creating their own little cults, even creating their own little churches, celebrating their own little liturgies. I could really go on about this. It's in previous episodes, and there's far more to say. But really, what I'm saying about the influence here of an outside source on this new Hermetic Catholic subculture, an outside source coming not only through Rudolf Steiner, but also through Tomberg's anthroposophical works, which, I repeat, he did not want republished. All of this, is another source that's coming in and making the subculture different from the magisterium. I'm just going to say again, we've been saying it already, our commitment on this channel is to always and everywhere be faithful to the Holy Church. That's what this channel is about, ladies and gentlemen. And here are some of the reasons why. The very dangers that we're talking about. But look, there's another set of reasons about why this subculture, is forming. And we've already been alluding to it, but hopefully it's not amiss to sort of, really stress this again. In our modern materialistic world, a world that some of these people are describing as disenchanted,
yes,
there is this tremendous hunger for mystery. This drives many people, like, the people you and I used to be, Kim,
yes,
into the New Age, because we don't see it in the church. We felt, of course, what we knew about the church was mainly the Protestant church, and you knew very little indeed, Kim, and I had at least more of a sort of understanding of Protestant Christianity.
I grew up with the church being something to be mocked.
Well, yes, because you grew up with this atheist.
Yeah,
yes.
But then in the New Age too, it supported it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the church seemed a joke.
Yes.
Something that was only for people who were backward.
Backwards, yes. So, yes, you came from this atheist background that mocked the church. I did not really come from a Protestant background, but it was still present in my parents and in my grandfather. And I just looked out at this thing, and it looked so dull, literalist. There was a while when I went to, my grandfather's Congregationalist church, because I felt I had to do this in England, and just heard these utterly banal hymns, these utterly banal sermons, and I did not see a Christianity of mystery. But we've spoken about that before.
Yes, we have.
The real point now is that I believe there is this emergent, sort of Hermetic Catholic subculture. That's the meta perspective that I'm coming to in this whole story around Sebastian Morello and Charles Coulombe and Peter Kwasniewski. I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing it on Substack. I'm seeing it on Substack particularly. Again, I'm going to reference the superb work done by Russ Arlen-Teakin. But what I'm really trying to do now, what we've been saying in this episode is that this presents enormous problems, for the church, for the magisterium of the church. All these things, I also think it provides enormous opportunities. And rather than, try to crucify these people, which is what I think is kind of going on in certain circles,
Yes.
I think we need to try to compassionately understand them. And so in my kind of analysis here, as we begin to wind our way down, Kim, not sure how far close to the end we are now, I'm pleading for understanding this new emergent Hermetic subculture, Catholic Christian subculture, as there are reasons for it. And one of them is this hunger for mystery. And, if you wanted to look at the bright side here, you could say, well, at least some of these people are not, they may not be faithful to the church, but, they're not running off in the New Age directions that we ran off in. They're not running off after Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky like I ran off. They are running to people who are deeply reverent of Christ, like Rudolf Steiner. But the real point is that they're hungering for something that the priests and bishops aren't giving them.
Yes, which is exactly what Sebastian is critiquing.
Yes, exactly what Sebastian is critiquing.
Yes, there's this hunger for mystery, and as we've been saying before, a church like the church that has emerged since the Second Vatican Council, with its push towards the Protestant communions, the push for ecumenism, and the things that Sebastian is bringing up with this development of the mind in this particular Cartesian way that has not only, he could say, infected society, but also infected the church. There is a great hunger for mystery, and the church is mystery. And people are wanting that to be expressed, and that to be lived, and for the bishops, the priests, to be sharing the mystery of the church with the world, with their congregations. But because they aren't in many ways, people tend to go elsewhere. And it's very difficult to be obedient. It's very difficult to follow a hierarchy that doesn't seem to be understanding this great hunger that we as the laity need. There was a priest that we knew in France, Persegui.
Beautiful priest.
And he was a parish priest, so he celebrated the new Mass, the Novus Ordo, but his heart was with the tradition. He had begun his formation in Écon
with the SSBX,
before the excommunication of Archbishop Lefebvre, but then he continued it in Rome after that. And he struggled to be obedient to his bishop and the tradition. He had many priest friends who were still with the SSPX, who he said were always criticizing the bishop or the pope, but he really struggled to be obedient, but he did. He was.
If I could just jump in briefly, what I remember him saying, Kim, is that there was a triangle. There was the Pope, there was the tradition of the church, and there was his bishop. How does he obey all three? And he said it's very tough. But here's the point. He was making an effort He was
Yes.
actually, even though it's a tough job to do, it
Yes.
was important to obey his bishop, obey the Pope and obey the tradition. So it's a tough, it's a triangle there that he gave. And, it's not easy. It's not easy when you see the church in this terrible state. But maybe just God will see the people truly making an effort, like Father Segui was making an effort. Go on, Kim, sorry.
Yes, Persegui was truly an inspiration, and he helped me enormously to come into the tradition properly as soon as Pope Benedict XVI released his Summorum Pontificum. He began celebrating daily the Old Mass, and you and I went as many times as we could.
Yeah.
He lived the mystery of the Church through the Old Mass, through the New Mass, through being a parish priest, everything. Truly an inspiration. So there's my little plug for this special priest.
Yeah.
And as I've said before,
your tribute to Persegui, and I'm glad you've made that. And again, there's the point. I just want to say the point. We're not necessarily all going to be perfect here, but it's important to make the effort. And Tomberg was about the same thing. It's important to make the effort,
yes,
to be faithful to the church.
yeah,
So that's why he keeps coming back to it again and again. But look, in being with all of this, I said this episode was hard. Like it was biting off more than I knew how to chew. Because I haven't sort of chewed through all this, this whole thing on Substack going on and other things in our life. But it's also really brought up for us, Kim, what our role in all of this is.
yes,
Because it seems like we do have some kind of role, and
absolutely.
I'm still kind of chewing that over, praying about it, meditating about it. It's like I want to say this. I do want to say this. None of my books are particularly Hermetic. Maybe arguably you could say the Gentle Traditionalist Returns begins to have a kind of Hermetic quality. I never set out to do work with this. I already said on this episode that this all took me by surprise. It was not something that I was intending to do, but when I started doing these Tomberg episodes, because I felt I had to. I felt like an inner calling, they were needed. And it turns out they're the most successful episodes on the channel. People want to hear me speaking about Tomberg, and they don't necessarily want to hear me speaking about Hilaire Belloc. And I might far prefer to be speaking about Hilaire Belloc. Far prefer. I think my real point is that, as we're contemplating the work we're doing, our work concerns traditionalism. It concerns the liturgy. We feel like we have this, call to focus on those things. Also, very much a call to focus on Ireland.
Yes.
How this tragedy of the, the so-called spirit of Vatican II, you could say, or what happened after Vatican II, has, I think, laid waste to Ireland.
Helped.
Yeah, sorry?
There are many factors, but it's helped.
Yes, obviously there are many factors. Obviously the whole situation in Ireland, as we've been saying in the Irish episodes, I think there's really like a cultural invasion of Anglo-American culture that accelerated after the 60s, but we won't get going on Ireland now. The real point is that, we both do, we sort of struggle to ask, we struggle to pray, Lord, what do you really want us to do? In the sort of autumn of our lives, we're in our 60s now, what are the things that we really need to do? And I'm clearly seeing that we do have a role in this.
Yes.
My primary work was never to set up a kind of Tomberg channel or anything like that. And we have all kinds of viewers who aren't interested in Tomberg at all, or who are even alienated, by the fact that we're speaking about Tomberg, that it seems so strange to them. But clearly, maybe I just say this. So I launched into doing these Tomberg videos. I even have one on the channel that's 5 hours long, which, people said, well, this is crazy, Roger. Why are you doing an episode that's 5 hours long? But I want to say this. These episodes are born out of processes of prayer, meditation, And that is what emerged. It took weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to do it. And the strange thing is, through the wonder of Google Analytics, I can see that people are watching that 5-hour episode right through to the end. So we do these very long episodes on this channel. They're meant to be kind of like evergreen episodes. Generally, we're not doing the kind of episodes that are here today, gone tomorrow. We're trying to do things that people will still be thinking about in the future. And I do think this new emergent subculture, they're going to be thinking about in the future. But we're still really having to pray and ask ourselves what our role in this is. But we do have a role.
Yes, we do. And when you wrote Cor Jesu Sacratissimum, you have written about your conversion from the New Age, coming to the Church, and you have, of course, included your reading of Meditations on the Tarot, and how Tomberg played a huge role in that.
Yes.
So yours and my journey to the Church naturally puts us in a similar place to a lot of these esotericists or hermeticists.
Yes.
We too have come to the Church, and so because we're putting our voice out there, we are possibly helping people, guiding people to make the same journey.
Yeah, you're right. I'm almost, I'm still chewing it over, but it's like, you're absolutely right. I can understand, maybe better than a lot of cradle Catholics can, who've maybe always, in some way, even if they've had a banal Novus Ordo kind of Christianity, they've always had the miracle of the Church sort of working in the background of their lives. Whereas, I really come from this world of disenchantment, to use the terms that are being bandied about on the internet now. I come from this disenchanted world. I went into the New Age because I was hungering for enchantment, to use those terms. So I can just naturally sympathize with all of this. And yes, I can really regret, I can really lament, people who are like attacking Sebastian Morello or attacking Charles Coulombe or attacking people like this, having no idea what's really going on here and not really seeing that there's a need for compassionate understanding here. Simple Christian compassion would dictate that people would really try to grapple with Sebastian's book, listen to it carefully. And if they listen to Sebastian or they listen to Tomberg and don't jump to conclusions, they will see this profound Christianity.
Yes, it's not about jumping to conclusions. It's all about listening and properly or deeply grappling with these things. There's a lot here. It's a big meal of an episode to digest.
Yeah, big meal, a lot to chew over for us. I think the things that you and I came here, or at least trying to chew over, are really critical for the 21st century of the Church. I repeat, never before have we been in this situation where, teaching is passing from the magisterium, to people on YouTube. And, of course, I'm with the paradox that we are people on YouTube, which gives us, an even deeper responsibility to strive everywhere and always to be faithful to the Church, to be faithful to the magisterium of the Church. But chewing this all over is, part of the work we do here in preparing these episodes. I'm just going to come back to some of the things I said at the beginning. In our own personal situation, we have begun to realize that unless something changes, that we will not be able to do these episodes and this kind of work that we've been doing, first on the blog, but now on Substack, that we want to do. At least we will not be able to do it with the same way that we've been doing it. It would have to be scaled back. And I want to say this, without going into all the elements of our personal situation, which are not really important here. What's important is not our personal situation. What's important here is whether the work can continue or not continue in the way that we've been doing this. So we are asking, for patrons on Substack, people who believe in the work we're trying to do here and believe that it should continue. Again, as I said at the beginning, we're aware that all kinds of people can only support us through their prayers. And, if you just sign up for a free subscription, the subscriptions on Substack are mainly always going to be free. But we are looking for a few patrons at, $8 a month. As I said, starting at $8 a month. And as I also mentioned, there is a lower tier of membership at $5 a month, $5 over at Buy Me a Coffee. I will put links down below to both Substack and Buy Me a Coffee. Yes, there's also higher tiers at Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee allows you to have higher levels of support, and we're very, very deeply grateful. Grateful to some of you who are very generously giving us these higher levels of support. This is going to be necessary if we are to continue this apostolate in this way, unless something changes. But what this is really about is, for people who believe in the work we're trying to do. And I want to just say something personally about myself. It's only as I started staring into the, maybe abyss of our situation, I had to ask, well, do we go in a completely different direction, where we scale this work back? And the more I looked at it, I found myself believing in our work like never before. That no, this has to go forward. We do need to be here, you and me, Kim, chewing over all these things, so to speak. Working with these things that are unusual. Things that you won't find on a lot of YouTube channels. Unusual things. Things that I dare to think we are chewing over things that are important for the church in the 21st century. So if you believe in our processes and you are in a situation to support this work, this unusual work, we will be very, very grateful to you. And we just encourage you to check us out on Substack, check out the posts on Substack, check out the notes section. We're doing notes there, which is a social media section on Substack. All those kinds of things are part of a bigger picture of what this apostolate is. But we're seeing that the two main wings of this apostolate from now on are going to be the YouTube videos, if we can continue them, and the website work, which is now being carried out on Substack. So I do want to close with that pitch for those of you who are in a position to help, and those of you who believe in the work we are trying to do, as we believe in it. And as I say, I'm coming to believe in it like I never have before. I just feel like it's got to go forward. So that's all I'm going to say, except I'll also say that, another way to support us is, of course, through buying the books. So I will leave you down below with an Amazon author link, and you can go and find my books there. And that's another small way of giving us a bit of support and giving yourself maybe a book in the process. As I say many times, what I do on this channel is nowhere near as good, I think, as what I'm doing in the books. So, I will just point you yet again to the books, and I will say just thank you very much for listening. God bless you, and bye for now.
And I echo that. God bless you, and bye for now.